Hello, I'm Jasser. Welcome to Face to Face with TVP World Editor-in-Chief Michał Broniatowski. We have a busy week behind us here in Poland as the presidential race approaches Sunday climax. We'll talk about that, but first and foremost about Russia's latest offer of peace talks with Ukraine. Michał, welcome.
Thank you very much. I would say it's calling what Russia is doing a peace offer is a brave statement.
Well, you can correct it later.
I can correct it immediately, but ask me a
question.
All right.
Well, I'm lost for words now. Look, we have been there before. After President Trump chose to not like President Vladimir Putin this week, after liking him the week before, it seems Russia moved and offered a new round of talks, and the Ukrainians responded tentatively but positively. So these talks will be taking place in Istanbul on Monday. What caught my attention was that the Russians this time weren't talking about issues that they talked before. So they weren't talking about removing the root causes of the conflict, which is a shorthand for saying we want the government in Kiev to change. And they weren't also talking about disarming or, reducing the Ukrainian army, which was another thing they demanded earlier. So the question to you, is this still a Russian ruse, or are we maybe entering a more serious phase of the negotiation?
One of the indications what are Moscow's intentions in this case is that after inviting Ukraine to Istanbul to talk, well, not inviting, but just telling them we are meeting on Monday, announced by their main negotiator, Mr. Medinsky, he wrote it. We expect them to come on that day. They also failed to send in advance their proposed memorandum. Mm-hmm. The deal was that both sides present memorandums, which Ukraine did. They sent it to Moscow and to Mr. Kellogg, the U.S. Negotiator,
mm-hmm.
But there's still no paper from Russia. So we don't know what will be in this memorandum. Either of the three conditions. Russia,
so they can come back. That's what you're saying, if at all.
I don't know. They will. Mm-hmm. I can hardly imagine that there will be any move in Russia position on the talks on Monday, because all of them would be a disaster domestically for Mr. Putin. So unless they are forced, they would not give an inch.
Right. But on the other hand, President Trump has not ruled out sanctions, and the oil price is down. The Europeans are imposing their sanctions. So the Russian economy is really beginning to bleed seriously. And at the same time, the U.S. Senate, there is a bipartisan bill proposed by Senator Lindsey Graham, which he said this week was coordinated with the White House. So in a sense, there is this bazooka hanging there on the wall. And, maybe finally Putin understands that this bazooka may actually start shooting.
Well, when it starts shooting, we will see it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, fair enough.
But as you said, 1 week ago, Mr. Trump liked Putin. This week, he said his private Twitter, which is, how do you call it? Truth Social.
Truth Social.
Yes.
We'll come back to the question of truth later.
Yes, but anyway, social. He said that he must have gone crazy. To say something like that about a leader of the other country, which is supposedly...
Are you surprised by this? I mean, he for the past 8 years, he's been calling everybody different offensive
I can't remember
names.
him calling Mr. Putin going crazy.
He even said something like, I don't know what happened to him, to Vladimir, my friend.
Yes, stop it. But now he's warning there'll be a big fire.
Mm-hmm.
And
he's playing with fire. It was Zelensky who used to play with fire.
And now
Trump.
Yes. So we will see when it happens.
Okay.
But in the meantime, you mentioned falling oil prices.
Mm-hmm.
There was an interesting story on BBC the other day in which they said and showed calculations according to which Russia got in its revenues from selling oil and gas seriously or very much bigger than a total of support that Ukraine received from the West. These revenues from selling this oil and gas to the same West. Right. So, of course, it's...
Well, when you say West, you should mention some of our regional...
yes, but also when you compare...
So it's Austria, it's Hungary, it's Slovakia.
So, they are members of the European Union.
Someone might argue that the question of whether Hungary is part of the West is nowadays open.
It is in the European Union, so...
Okay, fair enough.
At least that. So... we've been hearing this talk about sanctions which are killing Russia every month over the last 3 years. And they are definitely not killing. They are very harmful, but still not destructive to their economy.
But if I may interrupt you, you're absolutely right quoting these numbers, but they are historical numbers, that's for once. And second, there was another calculation this week on which we reported actually at TVP World that Russia lost about $500 billion in revenues from oil. So yes, the volume of their revenue that they used to receive is very seriously going down. And if the oil price stays at around 60 per barrel, that is going to hit the Russian budget really hard. And if these new sanctions from the US come on stream, then it's going to be even more difficult. So Russia is under pressure, or not?
It is under pressure. It has been for 3 years.
Okay.
So let's
right.
stop on this.
Okay, so, speaking of... It's just, for me, it's just still very hard to accept that President Trump and the people around him have no strategy here and that they're clueless.
I think that we've mentioned it here several times. His strategy is global strategy in which he wants to weaken China and its close allies, which is Iran and North Korea. He wants to weaken them by luring Russia away from them. And this effort failed. His Smiles offensive towards Mr. Putin only helped him, gave him leverage, apparently, in talks with China, which resulted at the beginning of May, on May 9th, Russian Victory Day, resulted in signing of several very important, for Moscow especially, agreements with Beijing. So,
right. Okay, let's stay with Mr. Trump. His team, his MAGA team, decided this week to finally wade into the Polish presidential election. They endorsed one of the candidates, the conservative Mr. Nawrocki, despite the fact that there's some cloud over his integrity and his behavior when he was a younger man, and there were all sorts of accusations.
When he was older, he also had...
Yes. So Kirsty Noem, the member of Trump's cabinet, attended a conservative conference in Poland and told Poles to vote for Mr. Nawrocki. But she also called the mayor of Warsaw, Rafał Trzaskowski, who is his opponent from the government coalition, a socialist, which must have come as a surprise to Mr. Trzaskowski and many Poles.
Yes, this is really using this title, which is abused very often by people from the right and far right.
Well, on the other hand, anyone who is left of far right is probably a socialist, no?
Yes,
including some conservatives.
Yes. which is the case of Trzaskowski. So, you know, we will see what happens on Sunday. But you know, America is telling the EU that it is supporting Trzaskowski, but at the same time, not only
Nawrocki, you mean?
No. That EU is supporting.
So they're accusing the EU of supporting.
Yes, but at the same time, they are meddling directly into Polish elections.
Because we need to mention the fact that the EU actually is not supporting Mr. Trzaskowski, is not doing anything in the campaign.
You know, the thing is that, in fact, the candidate of the former ruling Polish party, Law and Justice, Mr. Nawrocki, in fact, is presenting Polish version of the MAGA
narrative
agenda, and Poland is not fresh to it. Poland lived through it for 8 years, from the very beginning of the rule of
Law and Justice.
Law and Justice. What they did, we saw also in the last few months in the US, like attacking civil service, attacking attempts to diminish the rule of judiciary and academy and media.
The same playbook.
The same playbook, of course, on a lower scale, because Poland is not no global power, but Poland is now a member of a democratic organization, which is the European Union, and we saw it already, and we now may see it coming to Poland, depending on the result of the Sunday elections.
The race, as we showed a moment ago, is neck and neck. I was a little surprised that Mr. Trzaskowski and his campaign basically ignored these statements from the MAGA camp as if they didn't happen. They didn't come out with any kind of reaction. Can you explain that to us?
Oh, well, they must have had their reasons.
Of course they have, but
I think they don't want to make it better known, so to say, to the public.
But if I may interrupt you, you know, in some other countries, in Canada, in Australia, in Germany, also in Romania recently, when there was a presidential election, actually the candidates who ultimately won, or parties that ultimately won elections, they actually reacted strongly to the kind of MAGA meddling, like J.D. Vance and others, and it was surprising that in Poland, silence.
Poland is a different country in this case, because you listed these 4 countries, which are traditionally skeptical towards, especially Germany.
But not Australia or Canada, that's new.
But definitely not as much loving America as Poles.
Okay, well, I think Australia has a long history of being a very close ally of America.
Yes, anyway, this is everything I can say about it, is that Poles are very friendly towards United States, traditionally, historically. The government and Trzaskowski might have chosen being silent on that, because they thought it would be counterproductive.
Okay. All right. There's one more aspect of this I wanted to talk to you about, which is that, you know, many analysts and people think MAGA movement and Trump, they're isolationists, you know, the sort of the American tradition of isolationism. But if you look at these interventions in politics of other countries, it looks like, on the contrary, they want to export their version of anti-globalist revolution, if you will, to Europe. And so far, with meager results. So could Poland become a turning point for the MAGA movement in Europe after Sunday?
You know, you may be right. I'm afraid that Poland, which for a year and a half seems to be turning its back on populism, on nationalism, let's call it blatant rule of law, that Poland is now this good pupil
of the MAGA movement.
No. We all thought that Poland is good.
Foster child of successful transition.
And it may well appear on Sunday night that we are no longer. That Poland becomes a country which is in turmoil because even if the president doesn't have big power in Poland, his election, Mr. Nawrocki's election, would result in major disruption, which may result in disintegration of the ruling coalition.
Right. Okay. Well, I'm sorry I'm staying with Mr. Trump, but I hope I will pick a subject more to your liking. This week, Elon Musk decided to quit, and I remember in one of our first programs after he was made chief of Doge, we were speculating how quickly it will take for him and Mr. Trump to fall out, and it seems that they finally did. Mr. Musk first said that he has had enough of financing political campaigns. He spent hundreds of millions of dollars on the Trump
nearly
campaign.
300.
And then he went on to criticize the new budget bill that Trump,
Big and beautiful.
big and beautiful.
And he said it cannot be at the same time big and beautiful.
But on the other hand, Mr. Trump also could hold a grudge against Mr. Musk, because Mr. Musk promised to deliver $2 trillion of savings through Doge, and ended up with 170 or something like that billion, which is a huge amount, but given the overall size of the US budget, it's not much. So they're mutually disappointed in each other.
You know, we have to remember that Mr. Musk was employed as a temporary government.
Oh, that's an excuse. You know that.
You know, we can always say.
So now you're taking Mr. Trump literally, right?
He cannot stay for longer than 4 months at his job.
Yeah, but everybody will speculate.
Of course, of course.
Okay, so you're pulling my leg now.
Yes, I am. I am sarcastic.
I'm sorry. You're sarcastic. Okay, I missed that.
If you didn't understand.
Well, I did.
Both guys had their own agenda, private agenda. Both President and Elon Musk. So one of these agendas must have won.
And it's always the state that wins. All right. We don't have much time left, but I wanted to go back to a subject that we were supposed to tackle in our previous show, Hungary, and whether the EU is seriously going to sanction Hungary, both for violations of the EU treaties domestically, which we see examples practically every week. But also, you know, nobody says this openly, but it's also about the fact that Hungary has aligned itself with Mr. Putin and is blocking a lot of European initiatives in this respect. So is it serious this time, this Article 7? And we will explain what Article 7 is.
Well, before Article 7, the European Union, without this requirement for unanimity, can impose, can block payments of
funds,
EU funds to a country which is breaking rules of the rule of law. You know, these sanctions were used against Poland 3 years ago, together with Hungary. It was
under the Law and Justice government.
Yes. This may be applied now without very.
But the voting rights, do you think this is realistic? Because they've been talking about this and...
Exactly.
You know,
well, Article 7. Article 7 is the only article in treaties of the European Union Treaty which has some provisions on castigating the countries which are not observing the basic rules of the European Union, which are described in Article 2. Hungary managed to break practically all of them.
Is it going to happen or not? Are they going to be...
Well, the problem is that first, before it happens, it has to be launched. For this, you need 23 countries,
right,
which is close to achieve, but not yet. We are not there yet because there are 20 countries which called on the Commission to start procedures. We still miss three, but already Germany and France, which are needed for this because they are big countries. And then we need unanimous decision to apply
in
the
the
Article
Council,
7.
in the meeting of Prime
Which
Ministers.
will be very difficult
difficult.
some countries are afraid that at some point it may
Apply
be
to
used
them as well.
against them.
Right.
Yes.
Well, I'm glad I squeezed that out of you at the end. Thank you, Michał, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching Face to Face. See you next week. But before we see us again, stay on with TVP World for more news and analysis. And during the weekend, we will be providing extensive coverage of the Polish election.